All right, good evening, all you gurus. Here we are, another Innate to Innate. And this evening we have a very special guest with us. She's a lady I've been friends with and somebody who I've learned a lot from for a number of years now. I feel really blessed to have her be part of the program. And her name is Lauze. And Lisa, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Norm. It really is an honor to join you tonight. I'm thrilled.
Great. Well, I'm glad to have you here. Now, I know you well, and I know some of our people who are joining on this evening don't know you so well. So why don't you give us a bit of background, and perhaps you can just share with us a bit of how you were introduced to chiropractic first and how you were introduced to network. That'd be great. That'd build a bit of context for our evening.
Sure. Well, I came into the network community probably about 8 years ago, and it was actually on the tail end of having done the Platinum Partnership with Tony Robbins. And I was actually going through a separation, and my hip had been popping in and out of joint, and I had struggled with that for about 9 months. And it's actually almost a little embarrassing to say now, but I was a little shy of chiropractic then. And it took some convincing, and a few people kept saying, you need to talk to Donnie Epstein, and I just kept resisting it. And then I had the opportunity to talk to Donnie outside of a UPW in Chicago, and he said, some very interesting things to me that were completely out of context for me at the time in terms of any kind of dialogue that I would have been having. And he asked me what was going on in my life at the time that my hip was popping in and out of joint. And, I had this big aha moment that it was, my separation literally that week. Mm-hmm. So that's the point at which I started to relate things back to my life experiences. And when I started full-time care in Port Moody with Jay Lepp, who is the connection between you and I.
Yeah.
I just got network right away. I mean, I was about 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, and, I don't know exactly why that was. So someone suggested to me that maybe because I had had a traumatic birth, so you come into this world under defense, and so there's everything that you experience from that point forward maybe is from a defended state. And so the impact that it had for me was so profound that I just kind of jumped in with both feet. And then along the way, I decided to become a somatorespiratory integration facilitator, aka SRI. And Jay and I just started working together. Clear days within the office. He was mentoring me, and we just had this shared passion for the work and sharing it with others. And then, my background was actually in business. So this was kind of a departure for me. And I migrated then towards Epstein Technologies, which is a business application of Donnie's work, taking the human body and then translating that into the corporate body. So I worked with Donnie and with Cheryl Cran on that. So I bridged both sides of the work. And that's my experience.
Awesome. Love it. And so I'm learning some new things about you already. That's great. And those who are jumping on board, why don't you just pop in? You can throw in your name and where you're tuning in from tonight. And always my inner guru, Innate to Innates, are a co-creative experience. So we are all part of a larger field. And as much as Lisa and I are going to be chatting back and forth, I want you who are tuning in out there to know you're part of this. And you can join in by just throwing your name and where you're from. And as time goes on, we'd love to get some questions too. It's a great opportunity to really tap into a wise soul, somebody who has walked through the dark night of the soul, who's been confronted her shadow side, her demons, and came through and has created something pretty extraordinary. Now, I'm jumping ahead a little bit,
Yeah.
but I do want to touch on, your own genesis as a practitioner. And I know there's even, like being a mom and business and everything that you juggle. There's been some times where it was like, it's been oh my goodness, like, where am I going with this? What's next?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Frustration, feeling of being stuck. Yeah, absolutely. And, that hip popping out of joint was the symptom of, I think really a culmination of lots of different life chapters that, we tend to go through in our life, and we close the door on it, and we sort of say, I'm done with that, next. And that hip was so much of a crossroads, so much of a roadblock. As a single parent, as I mentioned, I was going through a separation and subsequent divorce. I was moving from Europe back to Canada. I had been there for 4 years. My son was 2 when I moved there. I was pregnant with my daughter. So, there was all these issues around identity, and I was being challenged by culture and really not knowing how I fit in there. And, coming back was like, and the hip was like a way of my body saying, enough. You have to connect to that innate wisdom. You have to know your own truth and your own soul, because in this place, the roadmap is always changing, and the rules around always changing, because I'm adapting to others. And as a single parent, and I was very much a single parent, with a former spouse who was in Switzerland, and it was interesting because on paper it looked like the dream life. My former husband, tall, dark, and handsome, and successful, and he was also, in addition to being a businessman, he was a pilot, and he piloted our own small jet, and it really looked so good. And yet I was really miserable. And I don't want to put that on him, because I'm responsible and accountable. But I wasn't being true to myself, and it was the life that dreams are made of, but it wasn't my dream. And so, that was a profound shift. And, through network, my guiding question became, how are things really, opposed to how they appear to be? And that really translated into how I parented my children. Like, what is this relationship really like, when it's just the 3 of us behind closed doors? And so I started unraveling all of the patterns, that had created this disconnect for me. And as I did that, I was more connected to myself, more grounded, and just a better parent. And that was kind of the driving force. And it was hard, I have to say. 7 years, I had, a few relationships in between, but those were reflections of the mirror of where I was at in my own life. And so those weren't always gratifying. I had to acknowledge that those were parts of myself. And, I really just kind of feel like I'm coming to that place, and it's always synchronistic, right? Beauty and the Beast has just been released. And, it's those parts of ourself that we have to accept in order to be whole and complete. And now, what I look for in a intimate relationship is so completely different. And as a parent, what I'm doing with my kids, again, totally has moved away from how things appear to be. My son wanted to play hockey, and I have to admit that took me a long time. It took me about 5 years for him to convince me, because I didn't think that was a good choice for him. But I had to finally say, if I want to acknowledge my own innate wisdom, then I have to cultivate it in him. And he knew that was what was calling him and what he was drawn to do. And it's interesting to see now that he has played hockey for only 4 years, but each year he's gone up a level. He's just on the verge of now going up another level. And, people are starting to notice that, he's, and it's interesting, the feedback I've gotten from coaches is what I think is a true compliment, in that they say he's a hockey player, not a superstar. He's just practicing his craft. It doesn't matter who's watching. It's about how connected he is to what he's doing and how that energizes him. And my daughter also, I didn't dance growing up, but that's what she's chosen for herself. And again, it was a little tricky for me to get on board. Tonight I went to one of her dress rehearsals and I had to do the 3 buns down the back of the head. And we've had some rocky moments, I have to say. But again, I can see that the more connected I am to what I'm passionate about, what I'm interested in, then the more they follow their own path, and the more courageous they are about breaking out, because it's just who they are. They don't have to be anything other than who they are. So exciting.
What a thought, okay? And at the end of the day, we really can't be anybody else but ourselves. I mean, it's like, so now here we are. This is it. Yeah,
this is it. And you know what? One of the really neat things is that I've noticed as I sit there watching them do their thing, and I say, why isn't she trusting the timing of her dance? Or why isn't he scoring more goals? He's good. I say to myself, why am I not scoring more goals in my life? Why am I not following through and putting them in the net? So I definitely see the relationship between when I change, when I evolve, and so do they.
It's fascinating to watch how our external is really a reflection of what's going on inside, and it takes responsibility to really claim that and to look within. So good on you. I'm just thinking what lovely parenting to really give permission to your kids to be who they are and to step into their own craft, their own gifts. That's lovely. So what I'm curious about is I'm going back a bit in time right now to, when you first were introduced to network and you had your hip that was not so happy, and we're in the middle of a separation that led to your divorce and 2 kids and relocating. And I mean, that's a lot going on. Yeah. And I think a lot of people who are tuning in tonight can relate to that busy life. I think especially women tend to have a lot on their plate. And in the middle of all this chaos, you're able to really tune into your own innate. And that's a part that I'm quite fascinated with. And I think you might have some ideas, suggestions to those tuning in of, sometimes ourselves kind of get swept away, and we don't have time, we don't make time for us to really connect to our own intuition, our own innate. What's given you the opportunity, or how have you created the opportunity to find time for you and to tune into your own inner wisdom?
That's a great question, and there's a big comprehensive answer, but there are some, really key pieces that I think have allowed me to do that. And it has been about, we talk a lot about self-care, but I found actually that was like about being very specific and allowing myself, to go there and express emotion. And I have to be totally honest, that's not something I could do publicly for a long time. I was having my own little cry in my bedroom. And, and when I got frustrated with my kids, I was like yelling in the pillow. And, and on a bad day, I yelled at them. It wasn't perfect. But I was committed to connecting. And, what was really interesting in terms of a need structure, what I saw is I had this strong drive as a woman to connect and be connected. But, when we feel like someone is taking away our significance by disrespecting us, or that's when we have a tendency to kind of lash out. And we we forego the connection. And so, I think as a woman, what it boiled down to is being vulnerable and being willing to say, you know what, I'm really kind of frustrated with this in terms of whatever that might be the service I'm getting here, but I'm also committed to working it through with you. So it was so beautiful, because then I didn't have to deny my anger or my frustration, but I didn't have to blow up the relationship either. It allowed me to sort of stay in this tighter place that was just sort of like, I'm not totally happy, but I'm willing to go through it with you. And just by communicating that to people, that changed it. I could, energetically, I could feel how things would shift. And then they'd be like, yeah, okay, let's work through this. And then there was safety around how we communicated together, whether that was my kids or, someone that I was working with. And it's interesting, the other piece of that is a willingness to follow the breadcrumbs, if you will. And, as you know, and when I was in North Vancouver, and I had a little center that I was renting out for different occasions, and it incorporated aspects of who I was. I had a real estate background. I also had immersed myself in the network community, facilitating SRI, and so I was able to bring that personal development piece together. But it wasn't the whole picture. And so, I was trying different things, and I was just, I'm going to try this. And what I noticed was that what didn't necessarily make sense, like I bought this RV to drive across Canada with my kids. And no one thought that made sense.
How old were your kids?
Oh, gosh. I think they were 7 and 9 at the time.
Right.
No one thought that made any sense, including me. But it had always been something that I had always said, one day I would like to do. And, I could never have anticipated the personal growth and development that would have come from that, including at one point I had to fly them home because the teacher strike ended. And, there was all this, I had to fly my dog home. And then, I'm driving across the U.S. by myself. And, I make this detour into my grandmother's hometown, my maternal grandmother's hometown. And it was so interesting because when I first met Donnie, he asked me about my relationship with my maternal grandmother. And I said a few things like, he said, who was she to you? I said, she's my spiritual mother. Now, those were words that had never crossed my lips before that moment or were a thought in my mind. But when I spoke them, I knew they were true. And he asked me about the relationship that she had with my grandfather, and I said, well, she was in a relationship with a domineering man. And I was just like, oh, me too. Like, I was always looking for that person who was smarter than that, would take care of everything. And he just said to me, I think this is a pattern that she couldn't complete in her life, and this is up to you. And I was like, oh, and that guided me to sort of say, who was this? Who am I most like here? And what are the patterns that she had? And I used that as my own gauge to see where I was going. And so here I am in this RV all by myself, and I pull into this town in Montana where my grandmother's from, where she grew up, and I walk the streets, and there's it's almost like it was the same as it was 100 years ago. And it, in that town, I had this, I went to this movie by myself, and a woman sat next to me and started talking to me, and she was so scared about so many different things in life. And I was just thinking, wow, she's terrified. And I thought, not me. I drove this RV. That night, as I, kind of scrambled back to the campground and, walking down dark, and winding streets, I got back and I realized there were parts of me that were terrified, that I hadn't acknowledged, that I hadn't accepted. And, and it took that circumstance to be in that isolated campground all by myself to be able to go there. And, so that I had no idea when I thought RV, what that would unfold for me. And, and then by the time I got back to Canada, I'm going across the border, and the border police are giving me a hard time. They're like, why would a woman be driving? What are you doing? And they went through my whole RV. And it's really funny because I had some 12 stages of healing in there books, and they came back and they said, okay, well, we're pretty sure that you're not, bringing in illegal contraband, but maybe this is some sort of tax evasion. Maybe you redid your RV inside. And, I was just so in my power with them by this point, and so authentically so. And I just said, you know what? You can go look online. You'll see that that's the same RV as anyone else. And I'm just going to go sit down over there until you work it out. Yeah. So, that was like a full circle moment. Like that conversation with Donnie, it was just like, I did it. I did it for us, Grandma. We're on the other side of that pattern. And, and that trip, honor those messages, like whatever that is, that it's in my top 3, my bucket list. It's more than a bucket list. There are spiritual lessons and growth in those experiences. And then you don't see what's on the other side of the RV until you take the RV trip. And, for me, that was then a year later, I took my kids out of school and I homeschooled them and I traveled through Europe with them. And that couldn't have happened without the RV trip.
Mm-hmm. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So jump in here. Lovely story. The echo's going to stop in a second. And I'm seeing a lot of people jumping on here. So I'd love to hear, where you're from. Throw your name in the comment section. I see Nadine's on. Awesome to have you on board, Nadine. Just saw you a couple minutes ago. And Jen and Karen. Awesome. Heather Lynn, I know you're listening in too. And there's a few other people too. So we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions for Lisa, that'd be awesome. You can throw it in the comment section, or if you want to just celebrate her courage, that would be great too. I think it's a pretty phenomenal story you just shared. So what I want to touch on is, I marvel in my own life and also in others, how we have these pieces that kind of emerge, that they keep popping up, and they're like, okay, I heard that. Oh, I heard it again. Oh, I heard it again. And it's like, okay, you're supposed to go drive your kids across North America in an RV, and and we keep hearing it and hearing it. And it's really irrational. Like, it's not like we sat down one day and thought, okay, what is the best way that I could create connection with my kids and create an action plan, a strategic plan, and pros and cons and all that stuff. It's really something calling from bigger than our mind. And what I know about those spiritual callings, in some level, they create instability. They break us out of our familiarity, of our rules, of our typical expectations, of our habits, of our, kind of nuances that we have created in life. And what I love was that you're able to, I think for a lot of people, to hear their innate. But then the next step of like, okay, I'm going to rent this RV and I'm going to travel across, like we're going to really do it. How many percentage of the people actually have the courage to do that? What suggestions, ideas, or tips do you have for people to take it from like an innate sense to follow through? No, I really need to do this.
That is a great question. I think if we're all honest with ourselves, that the greatest parts of our life, and I had only done that once. And if everyone could just remember that one time that they had done it, when I was 21 years old, I had actually just started university. I was planning on getting my bachelor's degree in nursing. And I was also working part-time for the superstores and in the apparel department. And they just started their Western expansion. And I'd only been there 9 months, and people had been there forever, but they put a posting up for an apparel supervisor in BC, and I had just been there that summer with some friends for a few weeks and fallen in love with it. And this was in Winnipeg. And I just said to my supervisor, that posting, that's kind of interesting to me because I love Vancouver. And she said, oh, well, the district manager's coming in today. You could talk to her about that. And so she walked in and she said, you're interested in the job? I said, I am. And she said, she talked to me for 10 minutes and she said, well, let's fly you out there to see if you can find a place to live. And, we'll put this package together. I was 21 years old. It was an incredible opportunity. And at the same time, I didn't know that many people. I had an aunt, kind of in the Lower Mainland, but I didn't have any reason to believe it was okay. Now, fortunately, I was young enough and crazy enough to not know that was crazy.
Love it.
And I thought I'd be maybe coming back in 6 months. Who knew, right? But I knew from that one experience, and I think we've all been young enough and did that, and I knew it was a game changer, that it changed my whole outlook on the world. It expanded who I was, both just from moving away from home, the job itself, the opportunity. And it's interesting because that experience is, it is again one of those experiences where I closed the door on it after the chapter was done. I was working 80 hours a week, but I had an opportunity to run a business in a box, essentially learn all the skills of an entrepreneur with a safety net. And I realized, as I did this accounting of and remembering of my life over the last 7 years, I realized that was key to how I got from there to here. That real estate experience, that empowered me. When I went through my divorce, I sold a property, I bought 3 smaller ones. And then, the Vancouver market went through the roof, and that's what allowed me. And it was risky. And I felt like a fish out of water. And I think that's key too, is that we have to allow ourselves to feel like a fish out of water. It doesn't always feel safe or certain, but again, there's this breadcrumb there for you that says, oh, wait a minute, all these experiences, I was a property manager. I know how to rent out a house. I just did it for other people. Now, all I have to do is roll the dice for myself. And in doing so, I allowed myself to do something else, which was design the life I wanted for me and my children. I bought 3 properties on one street, and I was able to be a single parent, at home with my kids. I worked with Jay in Port Moody and back and forth between North Vancouver with the SRI on a very part-time basis. And so I was, in a unique position of allowing myself to grow and develop as a woman, as a mother, and at the same time developing my business acumen in the way that worked for me. And then, like I said, it was like the next chapter was, wow, I can now sell these properties. We're at the top of the bubble. This is the right time to do it. Again, that intuition, right time, and do what I always thought would have helped me, which was, I always said that if I had seen the world before I went to high school, I would have appreciated it more. So here I was parenting, an 11-year-old boy and a 9-year-old daughter. And I thought, if they can see the world before they go to high school, that will create their own inner guru experience. They're not going to believe that the world is as big as their high school. They're going to know it's bigger. And that's what, was one of the breadcrumbs. It's like, yeah, that was something I always wanted to do. So let's do it. And so it's just there, and it's constantly there. And you just sort of say, here's the opportunity. It may not feel comfortable, but again, it's like the RV. We wouldn't have got to the homeschooling if we hadn't taken the RV trip.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when we came back from the travel time in Europe, we, you know, now we had this broader sense of an identity as a family, as individuals, and now we could do anything we really wanted to do, which allowed us to make another move on top of that, which was another leap of faith and more trust. But, you know, one step at a time, just allowing myself to pick up the breadcrumbs and say, isn't this interesting? And asking questions like, well, what would it be like if we moved to Penticton? You know, what about hockey? Oh, there's the best hockey in the province there. Who knew? Right? And then it's just like, and then the universe just keeps, as long as I keep asking the questions, as long as I'm curious, it's just like it just keeps providing me more breadcrumbs. And suddenly my basket is overflowing. And I say, oh, let's move. Let's do it. And it just made sense on so many different levels. And I created a better lifestyle for us here. You know, again, deeper connections, more meaningful. And it was just around the willingness to pick up those breadcrumbs.
Courage. Listening and then follow through.
Yes.
Good for you. Awesome. I look. This will clear itself out. I look back to my arrival in Nanaimo, and you know, I arrived in a town that I knew literally no one. I knew two classmates from college, from CMCC, but other than that, I didn't know anybody here. And I look back at it now, and I'm like, I had more balls than brains. You know, it's like, jump in, here we go, and we're gonna figure out how to make it go. You know, if we just throw ourselves into it, we're gonna figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if we're kind of on the sidelines with one toe in going, oh, I got to figure it out first, we're not fully committed. So I want to just bring up this comment here. Thank you, everybody, for throwing your comments in here. And this is from Crystal, who says, we have to allow ourselves to feel like a fish out of water. So true.
Hi, Crystal.
That's great. All right. And, you know, and that's really our growth point, right? Is that point of instability where we don't necessarily have a roadmap of what's next. But what I love seeing is that, you know, if we work off our previous learnings, our previous resources, how the universe has really helped to mold us, you know, the next step is just a progression from there. Often people will find themselves in a place and they go, oh, what did I do in my past that brought me to where I am? And I see it more in a different angle. I see, where am I here to, how can I use this to better me for the future? What can I learn from this? What's the opportunity in this?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
I totally agree with that. And you know, it's interesting because revisiting the past doesn't always feel good. But if we revisit the past, for some of us, that, you know, where we see it as who I'm becoming, who I'm, you know, evolving into, then it's a worthwhile thing. And it's not a heady thing. It's an experiential thing. You know, I know you know what I mean in terms of like just connecting to that. And as you know, I think one of the things that I really resonates with me recently is the idea of story, right? And you know, I realize that even the good stories sometimes create a disconnect. You know, I always had this story about my first husband, and you know, he's now happily married to his partner, and Paul. And you know, I always, you know, the story was how much love we cultivated from this relationship, and how we, you know, we're still growing strong after 25 years, and all those sorts of things. But you know, whatever the pattern is, even when it's a positive story, and I've had, you know, negative stories that I've told over and over again, but it's protecting me from a feeling, right? And that feeling, I think, and it's something that really hit me recently, was the feeling that, you know, the truth is that if I had handled it differently then, it might have had a different outcome. It had a beautiful outcome, but again, the story allowed me a little bit of disconnect from being accountable for it not taking a different path. And so I'm very mindful of that now, about just being vulnerable and being in the moment, and using story to communicate, but not to protect me.
That's deep. I'm going to sit with that for a minute. So using our story to communicate with another, but not necessarily to protect. Yeah, we get so kind of hard-cased with our stories, our identities, our roles, and I'm a mom, and this is what this looks like, even our background, and I'm a real estate manager, all these different things. But yeah, that can really separate us from this now moment of being in tune with what is present. What am I feeling right here, right now? Love it. All right, so we've got a bunch of other people online, so why don't you tune in, throw in your comments. Okay, what are you guys gleaming from Lisa? I certainly am a lot. I'm appreciating the conversation. And I think it's really incredible to see, it hasn't been that long, really, just 8 years. I think you said, right, with your journey with NSA and how, we went from relationship, relocated, worked with some property, we learned SRI, now we're working with Jay. It's been a pretty transformative 8 years, pretty diverse. You've touched on a lot of different things. So let me tune into my next question. So there's somebody out there who's waiting to make a leap. All right. What words do you have for them?
Ooh. I love this because I always get that we're talking to ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Like everything we're saying, if we're giving advice of some kind, we're talking to ourselves. And one of the things that brought me here in terms of what I hoped a network would provide with me is the relationship of my dream. And as it turned out, the relationship of my dreams was the relationship that I have with myself. And it's at that precise moment that we can be fully available to love and commitment. And so that's a place where I'm on the threshold of. And, allowing someone in who has the ability to go there with me, as opposed to pick someone who surely couldn't. So I am mindful of how challenging that is, in all these areas of my life. This is the one that has eluded me, so to speak. So what I would say to you is what I would, say to myself is, trust in the timing of the moment, and just play assertively, not defensively. Trust that every breadcrumb, every opportunity it's not a trick. It's there for you to take the next step forward and embrace it. Just embrace it and embrace the discomfort. As I was preparing to jump online with you, I mentioned that I had to get out to my daughter's performance, which is, her dress rehearsal, which is so important to her. And we're on the eve of my son going to do his tryouts for the team he'll play hockey with for the next year tomorrow morning. And so I'm so aware, with every cell in my body, that we're all on the cusp of something really exciting and wonderful for us, which included, the opportunity to reconnect with Norm and all of you and to, be transparent. I have been, very transparent in small community over the last 7 years, facilitating, co-facilitating, but this is, I have not been a social media person. And so thanks, Norm, for inviting me out, and know that that feeling of, don't even put a label on it. It's just a feeling. And, it's who you're becoming, and it's exciting, and it's just another layer of the onion. So, I just say move forward, and you don't even have to be courageous. You just have to be vulnerable.
Beautiful piece. Beautiful piece. And thank you so much for making it personal here tonight. And, you just keep bringing it back to yourself and your own lessons that you're learning here. Well done. All right. I am going to throw up Kate's comment. She says, I like the concept that when we're giving advice, we're talking to ourselves. That's going to be one of my takeaways tonight. Karen offers, she says, do you ever feel that once you're tapped in, there aren't enough hours in the day? It's almost like there are too many things to do all at once.
Oh, I love you, Karen. I thank you for that question. And I can honestly say that's a resounding yes. My 50th birthday is coming up in June, and I have felt that pull. And, just recently, probably around Christmas, my kids went away to see their grandmother on the East Coast for a week, and I had this time to do nothing. And Norm knows me well enough to know, and everything that I've said is all this stuff that I've done, and I am busy doing it. And at the same time, what I really had to acknowledge was that I also was feeling held hostage, because there was so many options, opportunities, different directions to go, different people to please. If I take on this project, they'll be really excited. And if I do this project, they'll be excited. And yet I couldn't do them all. So I made a commitment to myself to stay quiet for this week over Christmas. And I was just like quiet. Every time I got an urge to do something, I didn't allow myself to do it. I just thought, I'm just going to stick with this, and the discomfort of not doing anything. So, what came from that, and it went on for a longer period, probably about 6 weeks on and off. What came from that was really just a realization that was the innate wisdom that I had been lacking, because I was so busy doing that I wasn't following the whispers of my own soul. And so once I was able to stay present with that, and there was a lot of emotion that I moved through that period. Like, I went to that movie, The Beauty and the Beast. I went to The Shack, that one, and just tears flooded down my cheeks. And I just allowed at this time, not being concerned with what other people might see or think, and viewing it as weakness as opposed to strength. And through that, it was, that's when I got the most clarity. When I started to see how, physical space, my experience as a real estate agent, I'm going to buy this physical space. I'm going to integrate wellness and business in this space. And it's going to be like a community center meets business incubator. And I get it. My experience, my first husband was an HR executive. My second one was a venture capitalist. So, and we don't give value, particularly as women, to those experiences unless we have some sort of accreditation. And I realized I have so much wisdom based on all of these life experiences. And I could create this incubator where women are empowered to run their businesses that are uniquely theirs based on their life experience. And then I become like an angel investor. I partner with them, and then I use my coaching skills, everything that I've learned through Tony and Donnie and all those pieces. And oh my God, there I am, all of me in it. Right? And that's,
She's juiced.
And so then there's lightness in it, because before I was trying to run those businesses, and I realized while I had a lot of management experience and leadership experience, that wasn't my gift. My gift was as an artist to create, to see a canvas. And that was never something that I honored in myself, because the culture of my family didn't honor it. And, I had experiences that shaped me and molded it. But, the beauty is that it's been in the pressure cooker for so long that now it's ready to blow off. And, this for me will be the first space here in Penticton. And my vision is to have other spaces to empower other women in communities, globally.
Wow, big vision. You're going to touch a lot of lives here, lady. You already have. And I feel really grateful that you've chosen to align yourself with the reorganizational community. And you've been incredibly gracious and generous with your support of Jay and of me and Heather Lynn and all the other docs and SRI facilitators that you've touched along the way, and people too. It's been really inspiring to see how much goodwill you've created in the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Norm. And I have to say, it's an honor to be with you here. And network is such an integral part of how I got to this point that, I couldn't say it to you often enough. What you're doing for people, what you're doing in your community is so powerful and so profound. And, when I think about what is possible, some of us who have been wounded, there's so much creativity there once we do remember. So what you're facilitating is change that we'll feel the ripple effect around the world with.
Awesome. Love it. All right. Well, this has been beautiful tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And we often finish up with a quote. And we sometimes ask one of B.J. Palmer. And I think tonight we'll ask a quote of Donald Epstein. So top of mind, what's one of your favorite Donnie Epstein quotes?
Oh, this one, and I'll just put it in context really quick, and it has to do with a story that he tells in Healing Myths and Healing Magic about his son being sick and saying, I'm sick, Dad, I just threw up. And he said, I wonder if that's really true, or is it better out than in? And I think that goes right across the board with whatever symptom or emotion being, I think, the key piece is it is better out than in, better expressed than repressed. And I think that if we could do that one thing, that the entire culture would shift.
I agree with that for sure. And so we can look at expressing symptoms. We can express our emotions. We can express our thoughts too, and how we're, what's going on for us. And I always tell people, you can clean it up later. Don't worry about trying to get it right in the moment. Get it out, get it on the plate, and then you can move forward from there. Cool. Okay. Well, I imagine there's going to be some people who are going to want to get in contact with you after today's talk. And so, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I think my personal email address is probably the best way to do that. And it's my name, Lisa, Lisa, Lauze, Lauze @gmail.com.
Okay, excellent. There we go. Any last words before we finish up?
No, just a big thank you to you and Heather Lynn and your community and everyone listening. It was just a lot of fun. And I just love the intimacy of what you're doing and, the resonance of us connecting to our inner truth, that there is no guru that's, going to make it right for us, that the truth is within us and the whispers of our soul will guide us.
Beautiful. Well said. Well said. Well, I'm going to leave it on that note. I don't think I can say it any better than that. So, Lisa, thank you so much for your time this evening. And yeah, beautiful. The innate in me blesses the innate in you. And everybody else tuning in across the world, this is a reminder to attune to your inner wisdom. Be well.